Hey, it's the Desert Druid. So I'm gonna act as though we're at a sleepover, and yeah, I'm gonna tell you a scary story. So my whole life, I've had some really horrifying, terrifying experiences, and I've been through a lot. Um, I grew up in Nevada, and I grew up in a part of Nevada that, even though it was close to Vegas, it was on the outskirts of it, back when it was mostly desert and it didn't have all of the housing developments that it has now. So I had a neighbor who was highly spiritual when it came to Native American history, Native American mythology and lore. And I remember we would have sleepovers with a bunch of the other neighbor kids. And we'd be out back and we'd tell ghost stories out by the fire. Um, I can't remember any of the ghost stories that he would tell us, but I remember experiencing some really creepy things staying in that tent for the sleepover. Um, so many, in fact, I couldn't possibly go over all of the creepy events that happened, from seeing shadows passing by, but realistically, those could be passed off as the parents being funny, coming out trying to scare the kids. So that story isn't as scary as what I'm about to tell you. Because he was so into Native American history, he was into the whole mythos of it. So I grew up with these Native American tales up until I was about 9 or 10. But I remember distinctly between 6 and 7, somewhere in that age range. I was very, very young. I had obsessions with dolls. I loved dolls for a very short period of time. So we moved into this, we had just moved there. We had just been introduced to the neighbor. We met his daughter, and his daughter had dolls everywhere, broken dolls, porcelain dolls, fabric dolls. I mean, they were every. She had hundreds of them, and it was a tiered shelf going all the way down her wall, and it was just filled with them, including the broken dolls, the dolls without eyes, the eyes of the dolls laying next to them. So this is where the story truly starts. So I had just met her at this point, and I remember probably a few weeks in, we had gotten very close with them, having some get togethers that included all the kids. She let me sleep in her room. I'm going to tell you right now, it was horrifying. For someone who loved dolls, there was someone who loved dolls more than me. And she was so obsessed with them that she would try to fix them. They weren't broken because she had broken them. They were broken because she would acquire them broken and she would fix them. She was quite a bit older than me. So I was 7, she was probably closer to 14. Probably like 13, 14. So she was quite a bit older. And she would fix the dolls. I never had an issue with dolls until I stayed the night there. And I stayed 2 nights. My mom and dad worked overnight graveyard on alternating shifts, and it was the only night where both of them were going to be gone. So they wanted to make sure that I was going to be safe somewhere where, you know, keep an eye on the kids. And I was an only child, so I had to go somewhere. So I went over to the neighbor's house and I spent the night in her room. And all was fine, all was well for hours, hours and hours. We stayed up really late, like a typical sleepover. We were playing with said dolls. Not all of them, of course, but we were playing with some of them. And I remember there was one of them, and the eye just kept flipping up and down, up and down, up and down. And she had warned me that the mechanism that makes the eye flip up and down, it's loose, so it would keep doing that. And it was one of those ones where the power of gravity closed the eyes and then opened them. This one in particular, I was fascinated by. I was playing with the eyelashes and I was playing with it. I was being really nice to it because, I'm an animist, so everything's got a soul, everything has like an animation to it. So um I cared very deeply for the doll. But I remembered distinctly after putting it back on the shelf and the lights turned out, I could hear what sounded like the mechanism closing and opening the eyes. And I looked at her and I said, I think I think I hear something, but I can't figure out what it is. And she said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's just the floors creaking." And I didn't believe her. I absolutely did not believe her because it sounded like the mechanism opening the eyes, closing them, opening them, closing them, opening them, closing them for like 10 minutes. And she would not turn the light back on. She's like, "Look, I'm trying to sleep. Can you please just be quiet, do something else? You know, if you can't sleep, that's fine, but don't make it so I can't sleep." So I just laid there very, very quietly. And it was very difficult because you have to imagine I'm between 6 and 7. So I'm just staring into the darkness, right? And it's still very, very dark to me. My eyes haven't quite adjusted. I hadn't quite figured out how to get your eyes to adjust to darkness. And I think I was facing the window. Oh no, I was facing the wall. So I didn't really want to look at it anyway. So I finally started like relaxing and the sound became more like a background noise, so I was kind of ignoring it. So I rolled over and it had to have been probably a few hours because the moon was perfectly in the window. So you actually got a little bit more light in the room because of where the window was angled. The moon was coming over this way. So it was finally in the perfect spot where it was really bright in the room. And it just so happened to be a full moon, wouldn't you know it? So I look over on this wall and there's that doll, perfectly still, absolutely still. And that's when I noticed that the sound had stopped. So I stared. Oh, did I stare at this doll for a long time because I was convinced that this doll was going to do it again. It was going to do it again. I knew it. I just didn't know when it was going to do it. So I stared at it. And I glanced around at the other dolls and I noticed the differences. Some of them had auburn hair, some of them had really dark hair, some of them were blonde, some of the eyes were blue, and one of them had like purple eyes and green eyes, and you could see it because the moon was shining in so perfectly. It was a beautiful flood of light. And out of nowhere, my eyes met back up with the one that I think had been blinking, and it had moved. I couldn't tell which direction it had moved, but it had moved. And one eye was open and one eye was closed. So I'm looking at it, blinking, kind of confused, trying to figure out. I was trying to really make sense of it all, and looking at this one in particular and thinking, well, the one eye that is open, it's very pretty. You know, thinking in my head, oh, you've got a very pretty eye. It's very pretty. And then all of a sudden, both eyes close, and then both eyes open and fell off the shelf. Now, it woke the neighbor girl up, and she said, "What happened?" I'm like, "I don't know. The doll fell off the shelf." And she looked at me and she said, "The one that was blinking?" I was like, "Yeah." She looked at me really wide-eyed, like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "I know you don't want to turn the light on and grab this doll, but I'm telling you, that doll fell off the shelf." Well, sure enough, on the shelf there was an empty spot where that doll had been, because she placed the doll there, and everything had a spot in her room, so if there was a space, you knew something was missing. So she looked on the ground. She saw nothing. There was nothing. The shelf had an empty spot, and on the floor where it should have fallen, there was nothing. Zero. absolutely nothing on the floor. And all of a sudden, I looked at her and I said, "It sounds like it's blinking again." And we both looked at each other wide eyed, flipped the light on, and searched the room under the bed, under her desk, in the trash can. I mean, we looked everywhere. And this doll was nowhere to be found. We could not figure out where it went. And from that point, for the rest of the night, probably until 3 or 4 in the morning, we were just trying to distract ourselves from the fact that the doll fell off the wall and now had vanished. Because neither of us had a very good explanation. I didn't go up and get it. She would have woken up. She would have felt me get out of bed. And we were trying to make sense of where the doll was, first of all. Second of all, how do we know it wasn't taken? Well, I know because I was watching the shelf. So we could not wrap our mind around, where did it go? Where did it go? Where did this doll go? We will never know. It was a porcelain doll. A porcelain doll. It would have shattered. Because we're looking at a distance. Well, I didn't give context as to how high the shelf was. For how high the shelf was, it was about 6 feet. For a porcelain doll, even on carpet, there's still a potential for damage. Oh no. No, no, no. At 4 in the morning, we were starting to settle back down and we'd finally stop thinking about that doll. No, at 4 in the morning, her dad comes barging in and says, "Why the hell did you put this doll on my bed?" He was looking at me when I woke up, staring. "Why did you put the doll in my face?" And we both looked at each other like, how? How did the doll get into her dad's room? Neither of us knew. We never figured it out. Never figured it out. And I never stayed in her room again. If I stayed there, I had to be in the living room. Or she stayed at my house. If most of the time I had her stay in my room, which, by the way, that is a whole nother can of worms I'm going to be telling you about. But that is one of the first of the most vivid memories that I have of the scariest thing that happened. I still do not understand how that doll got into his bed. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll be posting again another scary story. I hope you get sleep tonight.